Okay, so we have our camera in this scene. Maybe we've set up our composition. I wanted to let you real or help you realize that our camera is a tool that has more options than just its placement. Right? So let's select our camera. Actually, let's go ahead and unhide our building too. See if this helps a little. No, and I will delete previous drawings on here. Delete those. So I'm going to go ahead and not hide my sky dome. I'm going to lock my sky dome, lock my building, lock my terrain, so I don't accidentally select that. Right? And I have my camera. I can place it. Right. So all of this is helpful, but what I want to talk about is some of the tools that are built into a camera. Right? And in real life, we know these. Right? We have the option to zoom. We have the option for focus. We have a lot of stuff, aperture, right? For this one particularly, I want to talk about what our focal length does to these shots. Right? So by default, if I select my camera, you'll see that I have focal length right here, and it's set at 35. Right? And so if I adjust this number, if I select this number and middle click drag out here, you'll see it feels like I'm pulling my camera away. I'm not pulling my camera away though. What I'm doing is I'm widening my lens, right? My camera is staying in the exact same location. If I were to, let's try doing this with a split screen so you can see. If I were to set this to perspective, yeah, there we go. So you can see where the camera is, right? The camera is staying in the same location, right? It just, as I adjust my focal length, I'm adjusting the length of the lens, right? And you can actually see that lens changing on the little camera example there, right? By default, all of your Maya cameras are going to be set to 35 as your focal length. So let's talk about what that means, right? Uh, this is like zooming a camera lens. If you have a digital SLR or whatever, and you have a zoom option on that, right? We can change that and make it longer, and we can zoom in and see something that's further away as if it's close, right? And we got a pretty long option here, right? I mean, we're up to 200 on our focal length, so I would assume I think that's millimeters, right? Now, that's with my camera in this same location. Recognize I can still move my camera, right? So look at what this looks like now. Isn't that weird? So my camera is now really far away here, and I am zoomed in on my green car, right? Now look how big the red car is. So here's how focal length works. The longer the lens, the longer your focal length, the more it starts to flatten out your shot, right? The more the less uh, perspective that you will get, right? So in perspective, we know that things that are further away look smaller, and that's going to be true if we are looking at this through a very long lens, right? Now, if I have a long lens, I'm close to my car, that car looks really far away, right? If I zoom out or pull my camera back really far and I start to zoom in, you'll still see like this one looks bigger, this one looks smaller, but as I zoom in, it feels like the things that are further away aren't quite as far away anymore, right? So this one is obviously getting closer, but it looks like this red car is even closer to the green car than it was, right? Again, I'm just going to kind of pull my camera back a little bit more. Look how far away my camera is from this shot, and we're still getting this very close scene, right? Now, what is happening here though is we're missing a lot of our environment now, right? Um, so a lot of I just want you to kind of understand that this is also very touchy. If I move it, that that red car is moving a lot, right? But it has a feel to it, right? This has a different feeling to what we're seeing, right? Um, so I think that this is something you should definitely keep in mind as you're setting up your shots. What is your focal length? And adjusting focal length or balancing focal length with lens length or with location of your camera is going to help you get some much more dynamic shots, right? If I want this car to still be more noticeable, right? Maybe at 35, even though we noticed it, it doesn't feel very threatening at that distance, right? Maybe I want to zoom out a little bit and put this at closer to maybe 50, or maybe let's try more like 75 or 17. 75, right? Not 753, 75. There we go. Right, this car may feel a little bit more threatening, and it gives us a little bit more opportunity on how we stage this shot. All right. Let's go ahead and set my camera back to something manageable. Something else that you'll want to remember is that cameras are hard to animate, right? And so you will want to consider what is required for each shot, right? Let me go ahead and select my camera here so I can focus in on it. So let's say I have a shot where my car is zooming really quickly through here, right? And I want to feel like I am kind of riding along with the car and seeing the red car chasing us from behind, right? To do this in real life, we would have a camera mounted to the car, right? So let's get it set up to where we would want it, right? And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference in my rig so I can actually do some animation here. So I'll go to my reference editor, I'll replace my green car reference, replace reference, and I'm going to choose the green car rig. Did that work? Should have. My main control. Oh, so it did work, but when I was placing this car, I moved my green car pivot point, right, which was not the right thing to do. I will zero that back out. And so now my main car should be animatable now. I'll move it over here where we can do some animation on it, and just kind of briefly to have something to see. I will rotate it and I'll have it just moving, let's say, I'm going to raise it up a little bit, from like here to here. I need to delete my, there we go. So frame 200, I will move that up to here. Got auto key on, so we should be seeing some motion. Let's see how fast that looks. Not very fast. Maybe move that key in a little faster here, make it like 170. The other thing I would do is just, this is very quick animation and stuff here, is I would open up my graph editor and just go ahead and set this start and end to linear. That way it feels like it's going fast at the beginning of the shot and at the end of the shot. Right. Now, something else you're seeing is even though it's moving in this viewport, it doesn't show up as moved in the camera viewport until I release the time slider. I want to change that. So I'm going to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and this is going to be under Display, I believe, and it is, maybe it's not Display, it's an Animation, Display, 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 oh, I'm sorry, time slider. And so what we want to set up is update view on playback. I want to set that to all and hit save. And I always just set that up. And that way when I'm scrubbing through here, it's going to update in all my views, right? So I'm going to start on frame like 170 here, and I'm going to get my camera in the location of what I would like this shot to look like. So maybe it's just something kind of simple like this, right? And then I'm going to select my, let's get a little lower here. Maybe something like this. And I want to see my other car in the background. I also would like to have the horizon line a little bit more like this. So I'm just kind of getting it set up. You know what, maybe this would make more sense from the driver's side. Yeah, I think that looks better from the driver's side. So we can pull out from it a little bit more. Right? Maybe even try to get some of this fender in there. Get that about on the rules of thirds, maybe something like this. So once I get this where I want it, I recognize that my camera is in this scene. My camera is this shot 3 cam. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group that camera. Control G. And so now we can call this cam group. Cam group. Cam. And so the camera's pivot point, if you look at this, is still on the camera, right? But the group pivot point is back here at the origin. Right? So we want to be a little careful with that. I could always do center pivot on the cam group, and it'll get it over there in the same location that the camera is, right? For the most part. But the reason I did that is so I can still move this camera a little bit if I want to. But what I can now do is take my main controller from my car, select the cam group, and say constrain parent. And so what I get now is wherever this car goes, my camera is following along with it, right? And so if we are running away from that red car, now we're able to sort of track that, right? Now, by leaving this shot 3 camera not constrained, that means I can still move this and make changes to it if I need to a little bit, because the group above it is what is actually traveling with it, right? In fact, I can even make really subtle animation changes throughout this whole thing if I wanted to. Right, so I'll select shot 3, and we were going through frame 170. What I could do is slowly pan over to something like this. And so what I'm getting is this subtle camera motion from a mounted camera. Right? Now, what I want you to notice is how mechanical that looks. And a lot of that is because this car is just flying in a straight line. Right? That's not how this car would really work. For me, I think what I would play with is how this car is moving. Are we banking a little bit as we go? Obviously, probably not a perfectly straight line, so maybe like a little bit more of an arc out, right? We get something like this. Here maybe they correct for the steering, so we get this. We get a quick turn back, and then this, as the car sort of heads to its final location. Now what you want to be careful not to do is grab this and start rotating, because you'll get stuck in this loop of rotation. I'm sort of manipulating it from here. Right? So that's a pretty jolting move right there. So that's probably not working so well, so I would take that out. Or maybe it's this one I need to take out. Right? So so this is something to consider. Now, to me, I'm actually feeling like there's a little too much noise going on in this motion. My thoughts is like most of that's probably coming from having the camera move on top of it. So I would probably just go ahead and delete that camera move and just have it staying straight. And I think the car movement is going to is going to add to that, right? All right. So so that's one option. Let's go ahead and create another camera, and talk about some of the other things we can do. This time I'm going to create a camera and an aim, right? I'll just go look in that camera and aim. It works a little differently, right? What a camera and an aim does is it allows you to move your camera, right? But your camera is always focused on a single point, right? And if we look at this, it makes a camera group, and that camera group has a camera and it has this little aim object, right? So this would work differently. Let's get our starting shot. Maybe it's something like this, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my camera aim and my main controller. Let's do it in the other, select it in the other order. Main controller, camera aim, and I'm going to say constrain. I'm sorry. I'm going to go to modify, match transformations, and then just match my translations. Okay, apparently I do need to do it in the other order. It's aim and then main controller, modify, match translations. And you'll see what happens is my aim is now way too far away. My aim is pointing at my green car, right? In fact, it's in the same exact location as my green car's controller. So one of the things I could do is I could select my main control and my camera aim, say constrain parent. And now when I scrub through this, we're going to follow this car. Now keep in mind, that's just the aim following. I can still move the camera itself, all right? So I could go out here to frame 170 and get something a little more interesting in the location of it, maybe even over to here, right? And what I end up getting is a shot that looks like this. Again, I would want to set up my this to make sure it's looking okay. All right. Now I may. I think it's worth pointing out that the way I did this was again pretty simple. I just put a constraint on the aim. We could be a little bit more flexible with this if we wanted to. I could select that aim. I could delete the constraint. I could select that aim and group it. Control G, right? And we would call this aim group. And so this aim group now, I should be able to move that, and it will still control my camera's aim, right? What I would do then is choose the main control, the aim group, and say constrain parent. And so we're going to get something still very similar, right? The difference is that we'll be able to offset that aim if we're not happy with where it's looking at. Right, so I could start this here, right, and adjust my aim over to here for the beginning frame. Right? So at the beginning it's like this, and then by the end on frame 170, I could change that aim to where it's like this. And so what we're getting is it's still tracking, but my camera is kind of catching up to it a little bit. So there's lots of little things that we can do in here with cameras. I want to show you one more thing, which is a lot of people have issues trying to orbit around something. Recognize that that this can be a little confusing, right? If I create me just a new camera, I go into that camera. when I'm moving my camera around, it appears that I'm orbiting around stuff, and I am, right? My camera is traveling in an arc, right? And so you would think that if I wanted to do a full animation around this, right, I should just be able to set a few keyframes as let me focus in on this, set a few keyframes as I'm going around it, and I would get a circular animation around this car. Well, that's not true. The reason for that is if I set a keyframe on my camera, I'm setting it on translations, rotations, and scales, right? And if I look at my camera, a translation for this camera is a straight line, right? If I set 2 translation keys, my camera is going to move in a straight line between those. Rotation is how the camera pivots around its own pivot point, right? So moving my camera in here is not this is not my rotation. This is a combination of translations, right, and rotations to get me to a more appealing camera view, right? So what that means is if what we want is to feel like this camera is rotating up, right? Like let's say we want it to feel like our camera is doing this boom movement up this way around the car. We need to set up a little bit of a camera rig to make that happen, right? So what I would consider doing is first I would probably go ahead and zero out my rotations just to make this a little easier on myself, maybe even my translations, right? Get this back to my origin point, and then I would group this camera again. Now I've been using groups, but you don't have to use groups. The other thing you could do is we could create a locator, right? And so this locator is something that we can see. It's not a group, right? And let's just full screen it out here where you can see this. So there's my locator, there's my camera, right? If I wanted this to function as a pivot point, now I'm able to see where that pivot point is, right? So let's try this. I'm gonna show you a couple of different things we could do with this. One is, and I want to put a sphere here just so you can see or a box here just so you can see the result of this, right? So if I put this box right here, very similar to the place of the locator, right? And I parented this camera underneath the locator like this. Watch what happens when I rotate this locator. The camera just pivots, or the whole group like pivots from that point, right? And if we are looking at this from this 2-camera perspective, it's going to look like we're booming up to here, right? And staying focused on that camera. Now that's not always what we want. In fact, that's not usually how a boom works. So what I want to do is ungroup or unparent that, right? And what I want to show you instead is I can group this camera, Control G. Again, usually when I group something, it's just to give me a new thing to constrain to, or something that the camera itself is not going to take on any of those values I don't want it to. So what I can do now is I could do locator, and then I could do on my cam group, I could do a constrain and do a point constrain. Well, let me think about this here. Let's try, yeah. So I'm going to do a parent constraint. I'm going to choose my options here, and I'm just going to uncheck the rotates. Okay? So I know that sounds weird, but trust me when I say this. So what that does is when I add that constraint, now this group's location is going to be altered by this locator, but not its rotation. And so that means when I start doing this, I get this kind of motion, right? which can be really kind of nice to have. Like it's a boom arm is what this is usually called, right? And so I can still move my camera in here closer. Look at what happens when I rotate here. Right? And I know that feels like translation. Let me move my camera back so you can see it from this angle. What we're actually getting though is that camera moving around this, right? It's like it's on an arm but still staying aimed, right? So that's a nice way to be able to control stuff like that. And on top of that, the cool thing is we still have the ability to rotate this camera around however we want to locally, right? So if I wanted to go in here and sort of aim it over this way, right? And then animate my locator boom, I get this pretty nice simple motion, right? Now there are a lot of camera rigs you can build, but I think that this is some nice settings or nice options for you in order to get some pretty simple, pretty predictable camera motions, right? That are easier to control in the graph editor. Where I think you're going to be really unhappy is if what you're trying to do is just create a camera, look through that camera, put it in a location that you want to see, right? Let's say you're wanting it to go from here to looking over at this car, right? If I select that, I hit S. I meant to do it down here. Oh yeah, let's say S on the end here, right? And then at the beginning, I wanted it to be back here, right? So I go in here and I grab my main root control. I focus in on it. I move my camera over to here. I zoom in. Right? Why is that not working so well? Let me. Oh, there we go. I get in here into something like this, right? I select my camera. I hit S there. Now, watching my animation happen, like it's really like it's very linear, right? I did all of those orbitings that I did there was just not. That was not set. Like it just set two keyframes, and it was point A and point B. Right? If we look at this in the 3D view, point A, point B, and we'll just see it make a linear transition to that. What a lot of people will try to do to fix this is they will get here halfway in the middle, and this kind of, you can do some stuff, it's just hard, right? And they'll be like, no, I wanted it to follow it like this, right? And so now you have this animation, and my camera starts doing some stuff. And sometimes that is what you want it to do, but sometimes it's just not. Like sometimes it's really like, this feels very 3D animated because a person with a camera can't run this fast, right? So what you want to be thinking about is how would have they really gotten that shot if they were filming it in real life? Would there be another car riding along beside this car trying to chase it? If so, maybe you need to have a little like shake to it and a little bit of that handheld feel to it. But literally, maybe the way to do that is just to animate a new object, create a locator and animate that kind of trying to keep up with this car, and adjusting it for that. So there's just a lot to think about in terms of how you make your camera work and how you are setting up each of these shots. So hopefully this has been helpful. I know this is a kind of a longer video. Again, this is going to be spread out over a couple of weeks to be watching these videos. So start working through them. I know we're at the end of the last video as I'm telling you this, but I will let you know this in class. Start working through them, and I think you'll get a lot out of them by the time you get to the end here. So let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.